Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. So today we're going to be unboxing, inspecting, and setting up the Taro FPV 130 little micro FPV racer quadcopter. And you can see on the side of the box here, Taro has a few different ones, the 120, 130, and the 150 here. I've got this one here, which is the TL130H1. I believe this is what this one is. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and unbox this, take it out of the box, inspect it nice and close up, and then I'm going to go ahead and hook it up to a Taranis controller. And also I got a computer over here on the side, which you can't really see if we pan over there. I'm going to show you how to hook it up to the computer and just make sure everything's configured in Clean Flight. This does use a Clean Flight firmware on the flight controller, so I'll be hooking that up real quick, showing you how to go and make sure it works, and then we'll be firing it up on the bench. And then in the next video I'm going to do a flight test. This video is just going to be the unbox, inspection, and setup, get it ready to fly. So let's go ahead and start with the unboxing. Don't forget that down in the description will be the links to this where you can check it out, see the current pricing and all the specs on this guy. Basically saying to use a 35C 450 milliamp battery with this one, 5.8 gigahertz FPV transmitter, 300 milliwatt is what it's saying is built in, 6 amp ESCs, brushless motors. I believe this one is the Naze flight controller. Alright, so let's go ahead and open up this thing and see what it's all about. Okay, so real simple. In the box, it's just basically a cardboard box with this sucker thrown in here. And then we get this little bag of goodies here. We get, looks like 2 sets of propellers. So that's great that they included 2 sets of propellers, instruction manual, and that's it. Nothing else in the box. For some reason, it looks like I'm missing a Velcro strap. I think the battery is sold separately, but I'm pretty sure they were supposed to include the Velcro strap to hold the battery in, unless it's somewhere in here. Let's go ahead and open this guy up and see if maybe I missed it in this package. Okay, so what we're getting in that package are some extra rubber feet. It looks like this one has pre-installed little sticky foam feet on the bottom for, you know, landing and bumps and stuff purposes. And so they give you an extra set of 8 of these, so that's cool in case they rip off, fly off. And here we have sticky tape Velcro, so that's probably going to be for like to hold the battery on if you wanted to, some extra support. And there's actually 2 more of these, so 2 more little 3M sticky Velcro patches here. So it looks like these are all propeller screws. They just gave me 2 bags. Anyway, we also have this USB connector to connect to the flight controller. It's just this little very small mini plug here, which allows us to plug in to the flight controller, and then this would be the one part that we plug into our computer to set up the flight controller, adjust some settings. Then we have our little instruction manual here, little tiny instruction manual. It's just a fold out guy, and it's just telling us what all the schematics are on the flight controller, where it's all going to be, everything's going to be connecting to. And I think I'm going to be connecting this X4R receiver. Now this is a almost ready to fly version where you have to bring in your receiver and the battery for this guy, and apparently the Velcro didn't come in the box with mine, but that's no problem. I do have a little piece of Velcro from a RunCam 2 that I'm also currently in review of that looks like it'll be the perfect size. Since RunCam includes 2 of these in the box, I can use one of those. Anyway, I'm going to be doing the S-Bus connection with the X4R receiver, which is probably going to be the fastest response time. I think S-Bus is known for its super quick response modulation for control. So I decided to use this since I had one laying around. And it looks like this guy here is already plugged into the S-Bus. You can see underneath there that that's the S-Bus connection on the flight controller. And then this will just be connecting to the receiver. And then we're going to just configure all that in the flight controller software when we connect it to the computer in just a second. Anyway, that's the manual. Gives you a little exploded view of the chassis and how it all is set up. So very simple. They do give you the website to go to if you have any more questions and need further instruction on setup on there. So anyway, this here is everything that comes in the box. And let's go ahead and get a little bit more close-up inspection of the TL130 real quick before we go into the connection and setup. So let's see, motors, 4000 kV, little brushless micro motors. These are the same motors that come on the DYS X160. I currently review generation 1, generation 2. I also have a generation 3 of that model that I still need to do the flight test on. But same exact motors it looks like, and these guys are great because they actually put these ESCs on top of the arms so you can easily change them out. If you've seen the DYS X160 quad, they have a integrated ESCs that I had some problems with. I had one fail and it was really difficult to do the soldering on that one, and so this one at least you can just, it's the traditional ESCs on top of the arms configuration. So I am actually liking this already, looking like it's going to be better than the DYS X160. But anyway, upon further inspection, looks like we have our 5 dip switch. This is going to be the 300 milliwatt video transmitter. It's just a standard antenna. There's no cloverleaf here. And this is direct soldered to the transmitter, it looks like. So you can't really swap this out to a cloverleaf, unfortunately, unless you want to do some soldering here and take this all apart. So it looks like it does have a nice pure carbon fiber chassis on the top and on the bottom. Looks like everything is a nice 2 millimeter to 3 millimeter on the entire craft here. We can see we have these aluminum standoffs that make it very sturdy. Already a little bit of a problem here. I think this plug is going to be the plug that you would plug into the flight controller, and it is blocked with this standoff. So that's unfortunate that the design of this whole thing, they blocked that with that standoff. So you're gonna have to remove that with a, it looks like this is a 1.5 millimeter. Alright, so coming over to the front here, looking at the camera in the front. This is the FPV camera. I'm not sure what the TVL, the lines of resolution is on this one, but I think it's just a standard CMOS camera. Cool thing about this one is it's pivoting on both sides with these little screws, and you can actually tilt this camera up. So I'm pushing it kind of hard all the way up, and it looks like we have a pretty decent degree of tilt there. Once you start flying faster, you can tilt that, and you can probably get, it looks like about a, I don't know, maybe a 25 to 30 degree angle. Of course, when you get better, you can tilt it up, or if you're already good, tilt it up. If you're not so great and just beginning, have that straight ahead to just maybe a little bit tilted up. So that's a very good option. In the DYS X160, there was no option to tilt your camera like this, so I like how they have integrated and designed this to have that option. Flipping it over on the bottom, it looks like we have a little beeper. So that's great. This is a beeper for the low voltage. So it has a built-in low voltage beeper, so you don't have to worry about putting on your own beeper and adding weight. It's already integrated into the whole system, so that when the cell of your battery pack gets probably around 3.3 to 3.2 volts, it'll start beeping, and that way you know you have to come in and land as soon as possible. We do have a JST connector here for a battery plug-in, and I'm going to be using, in preparation of getting this, I went ahead and ordered a couple of these Nanotech 450 milliamp. These are 65 to 130 C discharge, so these are a crazy high discharge. So this thing is going to have no problem. It's going to have no problem keeping up. Probably definitely a little overkill for this one as far as the discharge. In the manual, it only called for, I think, 35 C. So this is like double that, if not more. So definitely overkill, but that's okay. I can use this for other stuff, and it will plug in perfectly with the JST already on here. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and plug this thing into the computer and see if we can get it all configured up. I'll have that on the screen here. I'm just gonna use this camera that we're watching this with and just kind of pan it over to the computer and set this whole thing up and get the clean flight connected and make sure everything's going to be set up and working. Okay, so here we are in front of the computer, and the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and just connect up my S-Bus X4R FrSky receiver here. We're just looking at the legend here on top, and basically the S-Bus is going to be this orange writing, and so we want to connect it to the bottom here, the bottom three. So basically we got the signal is going to be the white wire, and then the middle is going to be the red power, and then the ground is going to be on the right if you're looking at it from straight down. So that should be connected to the S-Bus. Okay, so if you guys don't have Clean Flight, just go ahead and go to the Google Apps and go ahead and download the Clean Flight and get that going. You're going to need to possibly download the drivers that will work with this flight controller and for the USB to be plugged in. So go ahead and head over to Taro's website. I'll have that in the description, and you can download the drivers required to connect it up. But basically we can't plug in because of that post. So the first thing we need to do is go ahead and take off this post, unfortunately. So that's a little bit of a con right off the bat. I know I already mentioned that before, but if you are into racing and you're trying to tune this thing in the field, to always have to take this thing off is going to be a pain in the butt. I guess you could leave it off and fly around, because unless you're crashing hard, there shouldn't really be any problem with leaving that off just until you get your quadcopter tuned the way you want it. Okay, so we're plugging in, and I see that the pins are more towards the bottom. So we want to make sure we plug in the correct way, not to break anything. So plug that in so it snaps in nice and tight. I always like to use a fingernail and just push in there and make sure it's nice and tight. Alright, so first thing we want to do is power up. So I'm going to go ahead and power this thing up by plugging in the battery pack. And we can hear it all power up. Now what's going to happen is you're going to hear this beeping. And if the beeping really irritates you, just take a piece of tape and go ahead and just cover up that beeper, because that's going to get really annoying really fast. And basically the reason it's beeping is because it doesn't have any signal. It's kind of in its fail-safe beep. And this one's kind of cool. It also automatically beeps if it crashes or you're out of connection from your transmitter, or if it's disarmed for a while. So at least if you do crash somewhere, you're going to hear this beep. It's pretty loud. I have the tape on there right now, so it's kind of quiet, but it's a cool homing beacon sound that's already built in with the beeper. So anyway, what we're going to do is go ahead and, once we have that powered up, we're just going to plug into an open USB port with the other side of this here. We're going to hear a little connection, and if you install the drivers, if you've never done this before, you just have to make sure that you're on the right COM port. I have it to go ahead and auto connect when this comes up, so we can see that it's already connected, and we can see this little graphic with the accelerometer moving it around. So the first thing you want to do is go ahead and back up your settings. Just hit this little backup button over here. What I want to do while this is on and booted up, and we have the receiver on here and everything, you can see that I just have the receiver and the battery just kind of hanging off the back of it over there, is I want to make sure it's bound to the Tyrannus. And I have already previously done this. It's just a basic binding process where when you are turning on the craft, you just hold in the bind button down and it goes into binding mode. And so I've already bound it to my Tyrannus. So if you look over here, when the Tyrannus turns on, you see the light turn green. So it's basically bound to the receiver and transmitter, and that beeping is going to go off. If you don't know how to, set up your model in a Tyrannus and configure it and stuff, there's a bunch of videos out on YouTube, and it shows you how to do all kinds of stuff with the Tyrannus. I'm not going to show you that here, but if you do need to, there's a bunch of videos out there you can check out. Anyway, moving on. So we have the Tyrannus bound and on. Everything is connected. That beeping sound stopped because it knows that we are ready to go. And the things you want to look at are basically over here. Let me just go ahead and zoom in. I know that I'm not using a screen capture device, I'm just using the camera, so it might be kind of hard to see. But things you want to set up, basically the configuration, you want to make sure the one-shot 125 is on. I believe these ESCs support that. Over on the right of the screen here. And I'm just going to leave kind of everything stock, how it is, and see how it performs in the first flight. And the main things you're looking at over here is depending on the receiver you're using. I'm using this one. This is where the S bus is, so I want to make sure that's checked. And I also want to make sure down here this is also S bus. And then go ahead and go down here and just click on the save down here. So you click that and it will save and reboot the flight controller. And then just make sure that you have connectivity with your transmitter and you should be ready to go. This next screen here is basically the fail-safe screen, and it's kind of telling you what it's going to do if it loses signal with the transmitter. So this is the area of concern we're looking at, and the main thing is if you do want to have that fail-safe, you have the option to just drop, where you could break it if it just drops out of the air. What I have is I have it to land. You can see how I have this check marked here to land. And I kind of set that up where I just have the motors. You just play with this, and what I did is just play with, you know, the Taranis controller and spin up the motors, shut the controller off, and then for a few seconds it's going to spin the motors at a certain speed, so it drops just a little bit slower. And then after a certain amount of time, you designate here on the bottom here, you can see it's saying delay for amount of time the motors will turn off during failsafe. So you can set however you want. I think I just have it for 5 seconds basically. So it'll, if the controller loses signal, it'll kind of float down with the motors spinning just a little bit, and then it'll touch the ground. If it's still falling after 5 seconds, then the motors will just shut off. So it's kind of cool, you have that option to set up a failsafe. And the PID tuning, I'm not going to mess with any of the PID tunings at all. So I'm not the best tuner when it comes to this stuff, but if you wanted to, you could go ahead and mess with this. Just make sure you had backed up your PIDs. But I'm just going to leave this all stock out of the box. I'm not going to touch anything. We'll see how it performs in the flight test coming up next. Then we're going to go over to the receiver screen, and in this one you want to make sure that your inputs, you're seeing some responses on your inputs. So over here I'm seeing my pitch and roll and my throttle and my yaw are all working. Okay, so this is probably the most important part of this whole thing, where you need to set up your modes. And this is basic. I'm sure there's some videos out there on Clean Flight which could probably do this better. I'm just showing you the basic way just to get this thing flying. So check out some other videos on Clean Flight if you really want to go in depth on how to do everything. But basically, I just, in the Taranis, oh, and also that goes for the Taranis too, obviously. But in the Taranis, I just basically designated some switches for the flight modes. So all the way up on this switch is going to be kind of the angle mode, where it's going to fly, but then it's going to come back to self-leveling, and it won't flip when you let off the stick. It'll come back to its horizontal position with the accelerometer. And then I have this mode where this is in the middle. This is kind of my normal MO for my flight modes I set up, where you put that in the middle and it will still self-level, but you can push the right stick all the way in one direction or the other and it will do flips. But when you let off the stick, it will try to self-level itself. And then I have this all the way back is going to be kind of the acro mode. And so that way, when you're flying, it will never self-level, so you have to actually pull the stick back. And that's more for faster racing or more experienced flyers. So anyway, that's how I have all those set up. With this one stock, the way it comes is, I believe it was throttle down and to the right is going to arm the motors. I don't like doing that because when I start flying crazy, I don't want it to disarm when I'm accidentally flying and I have this position on my left stick and it disarms in the air by accident. I always like to have a designated toggle switch. So what I did is I just did this this back one here, this back switch. I have this designated to, if you can see the screen here, when I flip that, you see how that little reticle is going to armed. When I flip it back, it's going over to disarmed. And then you can just slide these little things around with your mouse and put them in the correct positions. These little green bars, put them in the correct positions to your corresponding switches. I didn't set up any voice activation for these, but what I will be doing, like I normally do, is setting up, just a little voice indication on the Tyrannus. The Tyrannus is cool because you can set up all the voices for each mode. And don't forget that I will have this Tyrannus down in the description. If you'd like to pick up, this is probably one of the best radios you can buy for somebody that's going to try to get into racing or just flying in general. I'd really recommend checking out a Tyrannus. I'll have a link to that down in the description so you can check the pricing and all the details on that. So anyway, the way I have this set up again was for arming. I have this switch to be flipped up forward. You can hear the beep on the TL130, and it's doing this constant beep just to let you know it's armed. You can hear that beep there. And then you can see how we're spinning up the motors. If you did want to test the motors, which is always a good idea, just go ahead and go down here to the motors section of the menu right here. Click on that, and then you can actually just make sure your motors are kind of working. You can spin them up individually, whatever you want to do. So you can see how I'm just kind of testing the motors with this slider just to make sure they're all working. Or you could do it individually to see how one motor's doing, to test if maybe you crashed and you can't figure out why your craft is flying all weird. Just go ahead and hook it up and test all the motors individually. Alright, cool. So that's just a basic, really quick and dirty setup in Clean Flight. Again, this is nowhere near any kind of advanced setup I'm doing here. It's just basic stuff just to get you started. So let's get out of this. Go ahead and disconnect everything and mount up the propellers and the battery and get this receiver mounted up inside of there, and then get ready for flight. Alright, next step. So as far as the receiver goes, I got to figure out a way to mount this thing. It's already bound and everything, so I won't really need to access any of these buttons, but I want to kind of mount it in a way that's going to be a little bit efficient, to where I can stick these antennas out the sides. Probably do some kind of zip tie technique on this. So let's go ahead and see what works here. Okay, yeah, so this one I'm just going to jam it into the back of the craft. Just going to try to get around this, underneath this power cable, and make sure that the antennas aren't really binding. Just make sure we kind of jam it in between here. This thing has, the X4R receiver has some cardboard on either side, so it looks like it will insulate it fine inside, so we won't have to worry about it shorting on anything. Alright, cool. So what I've chosen to do for the best possible range and durability is I've got a couple of pieces of heat shrink here and also some zip ties. So I'm just going to zip tie, kind of like what most people do with racers, is zip tie these zip ties in here and just kind of have them sticking them out, and then shrink wrap the antennas straight to the zip ties. So let's go ahead and do that real quick and see how that works out. Okay, so one zip tie on this side. Just going to go ahead and zip it all the way into around this little guy here. And I'm going to want to make sure that this one, I'm going to go all the way to the front on this, so there's room for the battery strap to grip in. And the reason I'm using two different colors of heat shrink tubing is because I don't have two reds. Otherwise I'd be using two reds. So here's a yellow one. Okay, slide that over. I want to make sure that since the battery is going to go on top here, I want to make sure that when I do this, the battery is still going to fit in, and that the zip tie knobs here are not going to interfere with the battery. So if you can see this, I kind of angle them as I zip tie them real tight. I kind of angle them out, and so you can have the best coverage at about this angle for reception on the controller, and it will also kind of keep it away from the propellers and the battery, so the battery can fit in there nice and snug. Put some heat to these guys, just a real light heat, and make the shrink tubing shrink. Cool, so that's going to give us some really good reception with these things all the way up like this and angled the way they are. So that's pretty much it. All that's left to do now is go ahead and put on the propellers. And they give you orange and green. At least I got orange and green, so up to you. You can put on all green or all orange. I think I'm gonna go ahead and put on all orange. I think orange is the color that actually shows up best in grass when you crash. So I'm gonna go ahead and put on the orange props. And really the way we're doing this is we're just finding the side that has the lettering on it. And we wanna make sure that that's the top. And you want to have the top edge, see how this is the top edge of this blade? Just basic rotor installation, basic propeller installation on a rotor like this. These motors are all going to spin like this. The rear ones are going to spin in towards the rear, and the front ones are going to spin in towards the front like that. So when you're putting on your rotors, you want to make sure that this top leading edge, so that when it does spin, that top edge is spinning into the correct direction. Okay, so it looks like we can use that same 1.5 millimeter hex wrench, and each motor has 2 screws on it, and making sure we tighten those nice and tight. Don't want to break anything or strip anything, so just be careful here. So let's put the battery on and fire it up and see how it works. Okay, so the way I routed this battery strap was basically just through the slots in the side and around the bottom for some extra strength. That'll also give the chassis a little more extra strength. And it's nice and snug right here on top. You can move it forward or back for some center of gravity a little bit if you wanted to. And it looks like the VTX is sticking up nicely, the antenna right about here. So when you are flying, you should have pretty good signal. Okay, so just for testing purposes, I got these big old head play goggles handy for just testing. So let's go ahead and plug these in and see if we get a image on the screen after we're all connected and powered up. I think we want to be in AV2, and there it is. All right, so it popped in. Got a nice clear picture here. I'll go ahead and put these up to the camera, and so you guys can see really just how good this camera is on the quad. There we go. It was a little bright on the bench here because I have all the lights going, but looks pretty good. So if possible, I just want to kind of see what the latency is in there. So little bit more than usual. So FPV looks really good. Just remember with this one, unless you change the antenna, you're going to want to be using this kind of monopole antenna to match up with the antenna here that's on the Taro. Cool, so let's go ahead and arm this thing and just see if the propellers are going to spin up. So that should be arming. Nice, ready to go. I'm just going to kind of hold it up here while I give it some throttle, make sure everything's going to work. Great. Ooh, I can feel that yank from that high C battery. Feels really good. It's actually pulling my hand up. Cool. Disarm that. Alright guys, so that was a great little setup. I hope you guys enjoyed that little setup here. In the next video, we're going to go ahead and get out to the park. And when that's done, I'll have that video pop up there on the top, and it'll also be down in the description. So in the next video, it's going to be a thorough flight test. I'll go ahead and have FPV up. I'll have commentary going, and we'll just see exactly how this performs. I have high hopes for this thing. I think it's going to do really well just out of the box. And don't forget to check this guy out in the description too. If you're interested in this guy, I'll have the Tyrannus in there, the head plays, and also head plays. They're not really meant for racing that much, but I'll just go ahead and put that in there just so you can check them out if you want to. And I'll have this guy down in there in the description so you can check out all the specs on this and the pricing on this and stuff. Anyway guys, I hope that helped you to set this guy up and you found it interesting. I do a lot of reviews like this, setups, mods, flight tests, reviews, and all kinds of stuff on quadcopters and RC, action cams, all kinds of stuff. So go ahead and check out the channel. I think you'll like it. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.